James DeGale wins an unimpressive 12-round majority decision over Porky Medina. This was one of the worst performances I've personally seen of James DeGale for quite some time now. And I've said on my channel for a very, very, very long time that in my opinion, James DeGale's biggest weakness is his ego. He is a naturally extremely confident character, and that confidence frequently spills over into arrogance and complacency. That's what cost him the George Groves fight, for example. And I think we saw the overconfidence manifest itself in the Lucian Bute fight too. He said he was going to go out there and be Marvin Hagler and just run straight through Lucian Bute. And it ended up actually being a pretty tough fight for James DeGale. It went the distance, and Bute gave him plenty of problems. There were people who thought that James DeGale actually lost that fight. It wasn't a flat-out robbery. I wasn't complaining that James DeGale got the decision, but I can understand how some people saw it the other way. And there are going to be some people, maybe a lot of people, who saw this fight here against Porky Medina as being controversial in terms of the decision. I've already seen people online saying they thought that Porky Medina won the fight. He was certainly the more active guy throughout the fight, threw way more punches and landed far more to the body than James DeGale did. James DeGale did land the most eye-catching headshots throughout the fight. This is true. And probably landed more clean headshots throughout the fight. But in a case of, volume over volume or quality, there are so many different criteria you have to consider. Who was making the fight, who was being the most aggressive, and if the guy who's throwing better quality or landing better quality is landing far less than the guy who's landing volume, then surely the guy who's landing the far more volume has to get those rounds. Surely, especially if he's the aggressor. You can't have, let's say, for example, I know this is an extreme example, but it's just an example for you to emphasize the point. If I'm fighting you and you throw 100 punches at me, but they're being half blocked on my gloves and whatnot, but you are getting through clean body shots. And then I land one clean punch on you, 1 or 2 clean punches in a round. Do you win that round? For me just landing 1 or 2 clean punches when you've been landing hundreds on me up and down the body, hitting me round the side of the head. Okay, they're being half blocked by my gloves, but they're kind of half getting through. My face is getting marked up. Do I really get that round? Again, that's an extreme example, but it's kind of what was happening here in the James DeGale Porky Medina fight. So I can totally understand the grievances some people are going to have with the decision. One judge had it a draw. The other 2 judges had it pretty wide for James DeGale. So let me know what you thought about the decision, people. And does this change the perception that you had of James DeGale? Some people are saying, well, on this form, Callum Smith would have a good chance of beating James DeGale right now. And I agree. But going back to what I said earlier, in my opinion, James DeGale's biggest weakness is his ego, complacency. And were he to fight Callum Smith, I think he would take it far more seriously. I think he would train far better. And I expect him to be far sharper. He would have to be. Because if he fought if he fought against Callum Smith the way he fought against Porky Medina, he'd lose the fight. No question in my mind about that. So yeah, James DeGale needs to get his ego in check somehow. I know that's hard for him because this guy is he's naturally an arrogant character. I'm not trying to diss him. I'm just being real. This is my perception of him, and it's always been my perception of him. He's a naturally very arrogant character. And he has an extremely high opinion of himself. And again, that's a blessing and a curse in a boxing ring. It's a blessing because you've never seen James DeGale go into any fight afraid or nervous or whatever. I'm sure he has some nerves, but generally speaking, as fighters go, James DeGale is one of the least jittery, least nervous fighters you're going to find. This is a guy who's happy to fight anybody. He was chasing down that Carl Froch fight. He wanted to fight Andre Ward. This guy recently has even been talking about moving up to light heavyweight and fighting Kovalev and Stevenson. And James DeGale's serious about this stuff. He has such a high opinion of himself in his own mind that he thinks fighting all those type of guys is well within his grasp to win those fights. Okay. And when you're dealing with a character like that, when he's facing somebody like a Porky Medina, you can imagine that in his mind, he was thinking this is a blowout for me. In fact, he said it before the fight that he expected to blow Porky Medina out, I think in 4 or 5 rounds earlier, when Badou Jack was able to get rid of Porky Medina. So yeah, I think it was a poor performance by James DeGale, not impressive at all. And it was his overconfidence and arrogance surfacing once again. And he's going to need to sort that out if he's actually going to step in the ring with any of those guys that I've been talking about. There's this ongoing debate about how he would have fared against Carl Froch. Many people straight away are jumping out and saying Froch would have destroyed him. Look at his performance here. Personally, as I said this before, based on this performance, absolutely Carl Froch would beat him. No question in my mind. But I don't think this was James DeGale at his best. And I think James DeGale at his best would outbox Carl Froch. That's just my opinion. Okay, styles make fights. Carl Froch is not a guy who comes forward with his hands up like a Porky Medina. When a guy comes forward with his hands up and he's in that shell, it's more difficult to land shots on him. And because he's squared up, he can get body shots off on you on both sides with the hooks. Froch is a guy who fights more side on. When he does come forward, his hands are down, leaves him open to DeGale counters, so on and so forth. One thing I will say is DeGale does fade late in fights. We've seen that many times, although he's never been stopped or dropped late in a fight. But he does seem to fade, and that would definitely favor Carl Froch later on. But I don't know. I still feel DeGale would outbox DeGale on top form would outbox Carl Froch. I mean, we saw what happened with Froch in the first Groves fight. We saw what happened with Froch in the Andre Dirrell fight. Many people felt he lost the Andre Dirrell fight. We saw what happened with him in the Jermaine Taylor fight. He was comprehensively outboxed by Jermaine Taylor up until the last round. So styles really do make fights. Is Carl Froch a better fighter than Porky Medina? Of course he is. Way better. But again, I don't think that was DeGale on top form. And I think Carl Froch's style is a little bit more complementary to James DeGale's style, I think, than a Porky Medina, because of the fact that Froch fights with those hands low. He does have quite slow feet, Froch, and keeps his chin in the air when he's throwing shots. He's wide open for counters, which DeGale would be able to hit him with. But anyway, that fight's never going to happen. That's a debate that is going to be pretty similar to the Froch-Calzaghe debate, because we all know that Calzaghe retired without fighting Froch, and Froch retired without fighting DeGale. Those were fights that were supposed to happen because, particularly the DeGale-Froch fight, because DeGale was mandatory for Froch's title, whereas I'm not sure if Froch was mandatory for Calzaghe's title. I can't remember. Maybe he was. But either way, it's a similar situation. Froch wanted Calzaghe. Calzaghe, didn't want to fight at the time for whatever reason, was fighting bigger opponents. And it's a similar situation with Froch and DeGale. Froch wanted that Chavez Jr. fight. And he said he couldn't get motivated for the DeGale fight. So we're left with the debate, which will rage on throughout history. Would Froch have beaten Calzaghe? Would DeGale have beaten Froch? That debate is never going to win. But so, it's pretty much pointless at this stage. Although I'm sure some people are going to be arguing both of those debates in the comment section below. But as for what is actually going to happen in James DeGale's career and who he is going to fight, he needs to build his own legacy. And that's what Carl Froch did, obviously. Since he didn't get the Calzaghe fight, he went on to build his own legacy without Calzaghe. James DeGale is going to have to do the same, without Carl Froch. And at the moment, based on his past two performances, particularly this one against Porky Medina, he's not doing a very good job of building his own legacy. He needs to step it up. One thing about Carl Froch, yeah, Carl Froch was an arrogant guy too. And he also could get complacent in fights. We definitely saw that in the first George Groves fight. He was way too complacent, far too overconfident in the first Groves fight. But one thing about Froch is that his conditioning was always top notch. Absolutely top notch. Left no stone unturned. Carl Froch is one of the best conditioned fighters I've ever seen in my life. Okay, this guy was always in fantastic condition. If you're hoping to try and outlast Carl Froch in a fight and hope that he tires, as Dwyer would say, good luck with that. He's not the kind of guy that tires. So you better have the skills to nullify Carl Froch and to nullify his offense. Because if you can't and you're late in a fight, you're going to have serious problems with him. James DeGale needs to take a leaf out of that book and needs to get in better condition. You know, don't get it twisted. Some people naturally can get ripped, can get chiseled more easily than others. It's down to genetics, a lot of it. So James DeGale is never going to look as chiseled as a Carl Froch. He don't have it in his genetics to be that way. But I still think he can shave off some of that puppy fat. And it's not just shaving off the fat for the sake of shaving it off. No, I think that if he trains harder, if he trains with more intensity, then I think he can get that, extra puppy fat off. I don't think James DeGale trains intensely. I think he trains in a relaxed fashion. And again, that's good. To some degree, it is good to be relaxed because it helps you defensively and what have you. But there's a saying in boxing that a lot of people use: train hard, fight easy. And I just think DeGale needs to be, and I know Jim McDonough is a taskmaster and all that type of stuff, but I don't know. I just get the feeling DeGale's not intense enough. When you see him on the bag, when you see him on the pads, when you see the training that they do show, I know most of the real stuff goes on behind closed doors, but still, I don't see that kind of intensity from DeGale that I want to see. You know, again, maybe he needs to feel a threat before we're going to see that type of intensity from him. And he just didn't get that type of threat or feel that type of threat from a Porky Medina. Anyway, kind of a long rambling video about this fight and James DeGale in general. But if he's going to go anywhere and carve out a legacy for himself, he's going to need to fix up, man. He can't be getting complacent like this. And it is what it is. Anyway, people, let me know how you felt about the fight and James DeGale as a fighter. How do you think he's going to match up against Badou Jack, a guy who I think is far less complacent than a James DeGale? Well, we'll see how Badou Jack does against Lucian Bute. We'll see. Drop your comments in the comment section below, people. It's your boy Hatman, I'm out.